storms keep on raging in my life, and sometimes it's hard to tell the night from day. Still the hope that lies within is reassured as I keep my eyes upon the distant shore. I know He'll lead me safely to that blessed place He has prepared. Yet if the storms don't cease, and if the winds keep on blowing in my life, my soul has been anchored in the Lord. Oh, the storms keep on raging in my life, and sometimes it's hard to tell the night from day. Still that hope that lies within is reassured as I keep my eyes upon the distant shore. I know He'll lead me safely to that blessed place that He is prepared. And yet if those storms don't cease, and if the winds keep on blowing in my life, my soul has been anchored in the Lord. Oh, I realize that sometimes in this life that I'm gonna be tossed and torn by the waves and the currents that seem so fierce. Yet in the Word of God, I've got an anchor, and it keeps me steadfast and unmovable despite the tide. And if the storms don't cease, and if the winds keep blowing across my life, my soul has been anchored in the Lord. My soul has been anchored in the Lord. My soul is steadfast. My soul can stand still. The billows may roll and breakers may dash. I shall not sway because He holds me fast. And so dark the day and clouds in the sky, but I know it's all right because Jesus is nigh. My soul is anchored. My soul is anchored. My soul is anchored. my soul, my soul, yes, my soul, I tell you, my soul has been anchored in the Lord. Whew. Happy anniversary. The life that love builds. I'm going to do something a little different homiletically today. And if you allow me just for a moment this morning, I want to stand in a slightly different place other than as your pastor. Not quite outside of you, but not fully inside either. Somewhere in between. As if I had been invited here as your guest speaker for the day. To observe what is happening among you, to listen, to watch, to pay attention, not only to what is said, but to what has been lived, to what has been carried, to what has sustained over time. Because sometimes it takes an outsider's eye to see what insiders have held so faithfully that they no longer name it. And sometimes it takes an insider's love to make sure that what is seen is not misunderstood. So I stand here today through the looking glass, not to judge, not to evaluate, but to witness, to see, and then to speak what is seen. So before I arrived here today, I did what any outsider might do. I searched. I looked to see what the world says about St. James Presbyterian Church in Harlem. I did not begin with your own voice. I began with what could be found, archived, referenced, recorded in public memory, written down in places that do not know your prayers but know your presence. I went online. And what I discovered immediately is that the world does not first describe you as a small congregation gathered here on Sunday morning. The world names you as history. The world names you as legacy. The world names you as part of something much larger than what can be seen in this moment. Because when I followed the trail, I did not begin here. I began with Shiloh. And I found names that still echo with power. Samuel Cornish, Henry Highland Garnett, Theodore Sedgwick Wright, who was the first black graduate of Princeton Theological Seminary. Men who did not separate faith from freedom, who did not separate theology from public life, who did not preach a gospel that could be contained within walls, but proclaimed a God who moved in history, who demanded justice, and who called a people to dignity. And I realized that before there was St. James, there was already a current moving, already a force forming, already a witness taking shape that would not be silenced, that would not be contained, and that would not be erased. And then I kept searching. And what I found was that this church has never been simply local, never been simply contained, but has always been connected, reaching into movements that stretch far beyond Harlem, far beyond New York City, far beyond even this nation. I found the early beginnings of the Ethiopian World Federation, a vision of global black identity and connection. I found support for the Lucy Laney Craft Schools, an investment in the minds and futures of black children when it was against the law. I found cultural exchange in something as delicate and profound as the Japanese doll exchange, where even in a segregated and fractured world, this community participated in gestures of global human connection. And I realized that what sits here is not simply a congregation. It is a node in a network of Black imagination, Black survival, Black intellectual life, Black global consciousness. And then I followed the names of those who have stood in this pulpit. And I encountered William Lloyd Imes, whose voice did not remain in Harlem, but moved into national and international conversations about race, religion, and identity. And I encountered the present witness, a voice that moves between church, academy, public life, continuing that same refusal to separate faith from the realities of the world. From the outside, what becomes unmistakably clear is that this church has never only been about itself. It has always been in conversation with the world, always responding, always speaking, always engaging. And then I came across that one thing that stopped me and held me in my place. A record preserved in public memories, noted even in the newspapers of this city, the New York Times in 1906. In response to the dishonorable discharge of Black soldiers from Brownsville, Texas, churches gathered, among them this one, a Thanksgiving service, not simply to give thanks, but to protest, to refuse silence, to stand before God and tell the truth about what was happening in the world, a service that is still going on to this day. And what I realized in that moment is that for this community, worship has never been a retreat, never been an escape, never been something that happens apart from the realities of injustice. Worship has been engagement. Worship has been resistance. Worship has been a way of saying that what happens in the world is not outside the concern of God. And therefore, it should not be outside the concern of this people. And yet, what the archives remembered, as I just had a conversation with the archivist from the Presbyterian Historical Society in an interview on Thursday, they remember the protest. They remember William Lloyd Imes processing from 137th Street to 140th Street with this 141st Street to this sanctuary through Harlem. Imagine that. Hundreds, if not 1,000 people marching across Harlem to their new church. The archives remember that. They remember the names that rose to prominence. But the archives don't remember who unlocked the doors. They do not remember who prepared the sanctuary. They do not remember who made sure the lights were on and the people could gather. They do not remember who stayed on when there was no article to be written, when there was no recognition to be given, where there was no certainty that any of this would continue. The archives don't remember the prayers that were prayed silently, the meals prepared, the sacrifices made, the decisions taken in faith without guarantee. They do not remember who kept this church alive in between the moments the world deemed important. But God remembers. God remembers the devotion that does not make the record. God remembers the faithfulness that does not make the headline. God remembers the love that sustains what history later celebrates. And the text from Acts Tells me that what I should really be looking for they devoted themselves not occasionally, not even when it was convenient, not even when it was celebrated, but with consistency, with intention, the simple willingness to remain. And now I understand that what the world calls legacy, the gospel calls devotion. And I need to say this plainly because it must be said. Some of you sitting here right now are a part of that devotion. Some of you have held this place together when no one saw you. Some of you have stayed when it would have been easier to leave. Some of you have given, served, prayed, showed up again and again without recognition, without applause, without certainty that it would all hold together, yet you remained. 20 years without a pastor in this pulpit called and installed, and you remained. And yet from the outside, I have to tell you, that is not normal. It is not normal for a community to remain when everything around it is shifting. It is not normal for people to keep gathering when resources are uncertain. It is not normal for a church to continue to sing, to pray, to proclaim when the world has offered it every reason to grow quiet. And yet, here you are. And then I hear in the song, the Lord is my shepherd. And now something else opens. Something deeper, something more intimate. Because for some of you, this place has been a green pasture. A place where you were fed, where you were found, where you found rest, where you encountered something that gave you life. And for others, this church has been the place you came to when you were already in the valley. When life had already become uncertain, when shadows had already gathered, when you needed somewhere to stand that would not give way beneath you. And for some of you, this church has been the table set in the presence of what should have undone you. It has been a place where even while things were not resolved, even while the valley did not disappear, you were sustained. And the testimony is not that the valley disappeared now. The testimony is that you were not alone in it. Thou art with me. Not distant, not theoretical, not abstract, but present. And if I listen closely, I can hear it in your story. Not always spoken, but deeply lived. You have been accompanied through change, through that uncertainty, through seasons that did not make sense, through questions that did not have answers, and yet someone remained with you. And then I hear the writer of 1 Peter, and I tread lightly and carefully because I know what it is to hear suffering misnamed, as has often been done with that text. But what I see here is not a people who have accepted harm. It is a people who have navigated a world that was not organized for their flourishing and have still found a way to remain faithful. A people who knows what it means to endure without losing themselves, to persist without surrendering their humanity, to continue without forgetting who they are. And then I hear the gospel. My sheep hear my voice. And now everything comes into focus. Because the question becomes, what has kept you here? What has held you? What has sustained you? You did not stay because it was easy. And you did not stay because everything made sense. You did not stay because there were no other options. You stayed because you recognized something, a voice. A voice that you had heard before. A voice that called you when you were uncertain. A voice that steadied you when everything else felt unstable. A voice that spoke life when everything around you suggested otherwise. And that voice has been learned over time through repetition, through relationship, through trust, until it became recognizable, until it became familiar, until it became something you could follow. And that voice did not stop at these walls. I see something else now. I see that this community is not only gathered, it is extended. It is dispersed. It is present in places beyond this room, beyond this block, beyond this neighborhood, and yet still connected, still listening, responding. Some of you are here. Some of you are not physically here. Some of you are watching, listening, joining from elsewhere, around the world, and yet you are no less part of this body. Because the voice reached you where you are, and you responded. On average, 200 engagements with worship a week. And now I understand something that the wider church has not yet figured out. The form has changed, but the function has not. The scale has shifted, but the devotion has not. The structure looks different, but life remains. And while others are trying to measure what has been lost, what I see here is a people learning how to live into what remains. And what remains is not small. What remains is not insignificant. What remains is not lacking. What remains is enough. More than enough, because God has never needed excess to create abundance. God has never depended on scale to sustain life. And I have to say this clearly. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not becoming less. You are living into something that others have not yet learned how to see. Because while institutions mourn decline, God has always shown how to work with what remains. Those 5 people from Shiloh who stood up on the floor of Presbyterian and demanded another black congregation in New York City. God has always known how to work with what remains. God always knows how to refine, how to concentrate, how to shape things new out of what is still alive. And there is even a witness, unsettling and often avoided, in the book of Revelation that reminds us there are moments when what is not life-giving falls away. Not as punishment, but as preparation. And from what remains, something new is formed. In the book of Revelation, they say when a third drops away, then a new heaven and a new earth is formed from what is left. A city, a pasture, streams running through it, enough for all, life sustained, praise continuing. And now I see it. You are not losing. You are being refined. You are not becoming less. You are becoming clear. And if I may remain here just for a moment longer, in this place between outsider and insider, I want to say something carefully because I remember what it means when someone stands in a pulpit and sees something that is not yet fully named. When a word is spoken, not as a prediction, but as recognition. If you remember 120th anniversary with the Reverend Dr. James Forbes, that's what he did. And what I see here, like him, is not simply a church that has lasted for 131 years. What I see is a people who know how to build life where life was not guaranteed. What I see is a community that does not wait for permission to be faithful. What I see is a witness that does not depend on being seen in order to see. What I see is love that has continued long enough to become whole. Love that has moved through devotion. Love that has moved through valleys. Love that has moved through endurance. Love that has learned how to listen and now stands as something complete, something whole, something still alive. And if this is what has been built, then the question before you is not whether anything is happening here. The question is, what will you do with what has been built? Will you trust it enough to carry it forward? Will you listen closely enough to hear where the voice is leading next? Will you remain devoted not to what was, but to what is still becoming? Because the same love that built this is not finished. The same voice that called you here is still calling. The same presence that carried you through is still with you. And the life that has been given is still unfolding. And so from where I stand, through the looking glass, just long enough to see clearly, I can say this. The world knows your history, but it does not yet fully know your life. Because what has been built here cannot be fully archived. It cannot be fully measured. It lives in you. And what love has built here will not be undone. Love built this. Love sustains this. And love ain't finished here. Most loving and gracious God, we just say thank you and give you thanks for being able to come this far by faith. Can't turn around because we've come this far by faith. Amen.